words I assume I know, God's probably saying, go look it up, Karen. So I looked up the word prodigal, and when that means they're spending money and resources just freely, living recklessly, wastefully, and very extravagant. So the prodigal is just reckless and careless and extravagant in all he's doing. And what we got to understand is, what did the Father give him? Livelihood. His livelihood. And it was wasted. But when he had spent all, there arose a severe famine in the land, and he began to be in want. Then he went and joined himself to a citizen of that country. He sent to him into the fields of swine, and he would gladly have filled his stomach with pods that the swine ate. And here's what caught my attention. It said, and I'm in the New King James Version, and no one gave him anything. When he was at the Father's house and he wanted to leave, the Father, when he was there, everything he needed was available to him, and he could get it. He left the Father's house, and now no one, not one person, would give him anything. It says, but when he came to himself, how many of the Father's hired servants have bread enough to spare? He understood back home, they didn't just have food to eat. They had the food to eat, and they had stuff left over. They had more than enough. I'm here to tell you, in the house of the Lord, there is more than enough to go around. You can get your fill. You can get your fill for your family, and there's going to be more than enough in the Father's house. And he said, and I perish with hunger. So he said, I'll rise and go to my father and say to him, Father, I've sinned against heaven and before you, and I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. He knew all he had to do was get to the house. Well, you know what? It doesn't even say he had to get to the house. He said, I just got to get to the Father. So prodigal, if you're out there and you're listening, all you got to do is get to the Father and let him know, I messed up. And we're going to find out in this next verse, the Father's going to be there, waiting. And we find in verse 20, and he arose and came to his father. The father was ready. But when he was still a great way off, his father saw him and had compassion and ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. And the son said to him, Father, I've sinned against heaven in your sight. He repented. He said, I know I've done wrong, and I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, and I'm going to pause right there, because that's where we're getting ready to find ourselves. You see, the Father was watching, was waiting. The Father was compassionate. The Father ran to him. The Father embraced him. The Father kissed him. I don't know about you, but I began to think of myself as a parent. If I take my kid in and I give him a hug and I give him a kiss and I give him some love, you know what I'm doing? I'm taking care of my kids emotionally. When you leave the house, your emotions may get off, and your emotions might get a little bit messed up. But if you can get back to the Father, he's ready to take care of those emotional needs. Right now, if you're dealing with emotional needs, the Father's waiting just to wrap his arms of love around you. The Father is waiting to take care of you emotionally. But he doesn't just want to take care of you emotionally, because if we look at the next line, we look at what the servants were doing. And this is where God directed me. God said, Karen, go to the story of the prodigal and look at what the servants were doing. And it said, but the father said to the servants, bring out the best robe and put it on him. You know what that means? It means there were clothes at the house. What he needed. There was a best robe, and there were good robes, and there were good things. You know what that tells me? I believe the house was in order. I don't believe they had to scrounge around to find something clean to give to the son. I believe that the clothes had been washed. Let's go on. It said, and they put a ring on his hands. You know what? They had to know where that ring was. The house was in order. And sandals on his feet. And bring the fatted calf here and kill it. And let us eat and be merry, for my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and now is found. And they began to be merry. You know what? If there was a fatted calf Somebody had to be feeding that cow to have it ready when he come home. So you know what God told me? God said, look like the Father and watch for them to come back and be ready to embrace them when they do come back. But he said, Karen, don't just sit around twiddling your thumbs being worried. He said, get up and get the house in order. And all of a sudden, I found balance when God began to tell me this. I began to get excited about getting back to this keyboard because I began to think, they're coming home. They're coming home. And when they come home, what does the prodigal need to find? The prodigal needs to find the house in the order, right? He doesn't need to find the house in disarray. I can tell you this, when we went into the quarantine thing, we sat around, there were meetings, we had some staff meetings, and you know what it was? It wasn't, well, there's a lot we can't do. What happened is we said, what can we do? What are there's probably some things that we haven't had time to get done that we can now get done. And when we came on the other side, we realized we did everything we could to keep the house in order. There were some of you that have helped keep the house in order. Do you know why it's important to keep the house in order? Because the prodigals are going to come back. And when they come back and when they come through those doors, what do they need to find? They need to find us being here. They need to find us with our praise in our hands. They need to find us with our hands lifted in worship. They don't need to come back and find a church that's just sitting down, just waiting on things. They need to find a church that has kept the house in order. When those prodigals come back, I'm saying we keep a dance in our feet. We're saying we're glad you came back. Come on, come on. It's time to have a party, and we need to welcome them in. If you have some prodigals in your life, it's time to keep the house in order. It's time. We've got to know where those robes are. We've got to know where the ring is. We've got to know where those shoes are. We've got to have this place ready. And so you know what? That takes us to what our church has been saying, finding your next steps. You know what? Let's look around and say, is there something here at church? What can I do to be a part of keeping First Church in order and ready to go when the prodigal comes back? You see, when we first moved into our house, there was no landscaping across the front. I like rose bushes and I like flowers and all this stuff. And so we began to, after I think this may be a year or two into being there, we had worked on the inside, and so we said it's time to start working on the outside. And I wanted to make the home to where when you pull in the driveway, it's inviting and it's pretty and it's nice and there's rose bushes and there's flowers. Well, here's the problem. I would come into my office and there was an area over here that was kind of overgrown with some stuff. And I would walk past it and I'd go into my office and sometimes I'd think, we need somebody should take care of that. Wow, that looks bad. And all of a sudden one day, the Father, as I'm getting out of my car, I'm walking in. Now, God has to be hard with me sometimes. He said, how dare you? To me, not to you. He said, Karen, you're making your house look nice. And you walk by this area all the time, and you've done nothing about it. And I said, okay, God, I'm going to make you a promise. My hands will not do one more thing at my house until I've taken care of your house. So you know what? I got my kids, and we came up here, and we put some gloves on, and we pulled weeds. I went to Walmart, and I bought some dirt, and we bought some flowers, and we bought some mulch, and we made this area look a little bit nicer. I wanted to keep the house in order, because when guests come in, I wanted things to look nice. You know what? Find your next step. If you haven't found your first step, find your first step. That's what Brother Chance encourages is every Sunday. Brother Kevin encourages. Find your step. Look around the house and say, is there anything I can do to get this house in order? You know why we got to keep the house in order? The prodigals are getting ready to come back. And we're going to need to be ready to be merry. We're going to need to have the fatted calf. We're going to need to be ready for the party. And what do they need? Let's say, what happens if they walk into ladies' prayer? Are we ready? Is the house in order? Lord, we're just worshiping you. We're ready. Come on. Come on. When they come back, I'm telling you, God has put this in my spirit, and I know I kind of keep repeating the same thing, but I think it's important. It's important to know the Father took care of the emotions, but he looked at the servants and said, take care of the physical. When the prodigals come back, there may be some physical needs we might need to help them through. and we might need to help take care of them. You know what? So I thank God for R&R being in place. I thank God for R&R, because whenever those come back in that are struggling with addictions, you know what we can say? We got a room ready. We got a room ready. We can help. We can help. Not just the emotional, not just the spiritual, but physical. It might cost me something to help some of these prodigals when they come back in. I want to say, God, I want to be willing. If I need to take some of my clothes and donate and give to them, you know what? Maybe I don't need to give them used clothes. Maybe I just need to go to wherever and order something. Somebody might need some clothes. Somebody might need some shoes. Somebody might need help paying with a light bill. We might need to physically help some of these prodigals when they come back. So I'm excited, because I'm saying, God, if you're telling me to get the house in order, you know what that means? He's getting ready to bring them home. Because he's looking afar off, and he sees into the future, and he sees them walking back. He sees them coming back to First Church. So I believe he's telling us, First Church, get ready. The prodigals are coming. When they get here, take care of them emotionally, take care of them spiritually, and you might have to take care of them physically, but I'm sending them your way. It was one Monday night. I'll be honest, we were at home. We had left here around 3:15. We get home, so it's roughly 3:30. And the kids said, okay, what are we doing the rest of the day? And I said, well, in about an hour, we'll leave and we'll go back to prayer. And Jonathan says, why did we even come home? So because I needed a little break. Are we going back to prayer tonight? I said, you know what? I did the woman thing. Let's put it on your dad. He's the man of God in the house. Ask him if we can skip prayer tonight. Well, around 4:30, 4:45, we got redressed and we came back to prayer. And I'm saying this because I'm really glad I didn't miss prayer that night, because at prayer, God had a little bit more for me out of this story. He said, okay, Karen, you've looked at the Father. You've looked at the servant. Now go find the Son. What was the Son doing? And I began to look through the Son, and I'll let you finish reading that. But the brother, the other brother, you know where he was? He was in the fields. Now, whether he was working or whether he was overseeing servants. We talked about this last night. And I see the brother as working in the fields, and Luke brought up a good point. He said, if they were rich and they had servants, do you really think the son was getting his hands dirty? He may have just been overseeing. So maybe he was, but all I know is the word says the other son was in the field. There is a field that is ripe and ready for harvest. We've got to be like the son in the fact that we've got to be working at the field. Now, here's the problem. We don't want to have the attitude of the other son. I imagine the son was probably hurt when that brother left. When the brother left, there was a void in the house, because I'm sure that other son had responsibilities. And when that son left, now the responsibilities fell on others to do. When people leave, there is a void. There's a void at the table. Now that chair was empty. So maybe that brother was just having a hard time emotionally because the other brother left. I don't know. But as I began to study the story, I find that the son that stayed was in the field. And he looked at the dad because he refused to come into the party. He looked at the dad and said, lo, these many years I've been serving you. I've never transgressed your commandment at any time. And yet you never gave me a young goat that I might make merry with my friends. And the part that stood out to me is it says, all of these years I've been serving you. And it seems like his service and the attitude of having to be working and in service is kind of what got him messed up. So I've prayed, God, don't let my service in what I'm doing for you, don't let, as I'm serving you, don't let me get that bad attitude of that son. Let me be more like the servant. So we just got to keep the house going. Let me be in the field working, but don't let my service turn my attitude and give me a bad attitude. So God, create a right spirit within me, but let me be found in the fields working when they come home. We've got to remember, we've just got to remember how to keep our hearts right, how to stay balanced. And whenever I was talking to Sister Whitney, I think she probably wrapped it up in a nice, neat package. And if you take anything from today, it's let's have the heart of the Father. Let's have the spirit of the servant and the hands of the brother. Let's not be afraid to roll up our sleeves, go to work. Let's not be afraid, and let's not be negligent of the prayer rooms. Let's keep the prayer rooms on fire. Let's keep ladies' prayer on fire. Let's keep R&R rolling. Let's keep new songs rolling. It's not a time to sit down and say, well, these are just the times. It's a time to say, we've got to have a new song ready. We need to make sure we've taken care of the animals. We need to make sure the fatted calf is ready to go. We need to make sure the house is in order. We need to make sure we know where the robes are, that we know where the shoes are, and that everything is in order. So when the prodigal returns, he returns to an uplifting home, an upbeat house, and he returns to good things. Because you don't want to walk in somewhere where it's down. So this next Sunday, if you're able to be in the house physically, if you're able to be in the house physically, you know what? Let's come and set the atmosphere for the prodigals when they return. Sister Stacy probably put it best at one time, and I don't remember if she told this to the singers, to the choir. I think she may have said it to the choir, and it stuck with me. She said, when I came to church, what I remembered was I came here, and it was easy to get to the Father. She said, I didn't feel like I was tripping over anything or anybody was in my way. So if we can do anything, let's make it easy for the prodigals to get to the Father. Let's just clear the path. Here he is. He's ready to embrace you, take care of you emotionally, take care of you spiritually. If there's something physically we need to do, Lord, give me a heart to get it done. Get the house ready, and let's be ready for the prodigal's return. And in doing that, we're going to go to the Lord in prayer. I'm going to have, tell you what, when you pray, if you want to just come down here to the side, if you want to stand where you're at, we're not going to go ahead and pass the microphone. We're going to be kind of aware of our times. But what I want is, I've asked Jess if she could pray over our community.